Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies shock. They're powerful, alright. We cover them all on your favorite part. So many movies we can't choose. Even when you win, you lose. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast. Be excellent to each other. Please have a word to your mother. They're from the best decades. Movie magic that never fades. Lightsabers clash, phasers set to stun. Action packed from dusk till dawn. We have deep thoughts and questions free. Come share our love of the movies we see. Life moves pretty fast. Some will fizzle and some movies last. I understood there would be no math. It's the 30-something movie podcast.
And welcome to week 2 of... I'm not even going to try the Scottish accent because it's just going to be...
You're not even going to try? John, I was I mean, you got to be in your element with all the Scottish stuff.
I kind of do it, Captain. That's a different franchise with a not-so-Scottish Scotsman.
Brothers and sisters are natural enemies, like Englishmen and Scots, or Welshmen and Scots, or Japanese and Scots, or Scots and other Scots. Damn Scots! They ruined Scotland!
You Scots sure are a contentious people.
You just made an enemy for life!
I was going to say for the accent, you could probably do the Sean Connery and just modify it slightly, yeah?
I could. You want to go back to another episode where we all try to do Sean Connery impersonations and it just goes dead silent, dead air?
Well, it was dead air when I tried it. That's one of the funniest bits of podcasting. It's just when I tried the Sean Connery, that one, it's just okay, moving on.
Well, here, try it this time, and then we'll say something.
No, not going to happen.
I promise that Bo will laugh with you.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I make no promises as to what I'm going to do, but I promise Bo will laugh with you.
I am going to do this though. I am going to go this. I have 2 Sean Connery thoughts to ponder for me, myself, and I that came up over break. So Hunt for Red October.
Okay.
They're shooting. Okay. Spoilers for Hunt for Red October.
Yeah.
But they're going down Red Route 1, the under route thing. And he's the torpedo's coming and they've got to crank the thing up and they're racing through and all the timing is off and they can't do the thing.
Sure.
And he's trying to figure out how far to go because they have to make the last little turn. So the torpedo hits again, spoilers for Hunt for Red October, please. Mm-hmm. And, they're all yelling at him Captain, what are you doing? And he relieves the one guy and he tells the other guy to be quiet and he's ignoring everything. And so there's a couple of times that, we had to take a little road trip over break and suddenly everyone's talking in the car and a turn got missed on the GPS and people are well, hey, we go this way. And I just absolutely love, because I was you know what, I should just put my earbuds in and just turn on my music Baby Driver style and just ignore everything around me. And, spoilers for Baby Driver. And, then all of a sudden I thought back to Sean Connery in Hunt for Red October when there's all that. And then all of a sudden you hear that intoning, men chanting, singing in the background and he's mouthing something to himself and he knows exactly when to turn. And I was that is such an awesome thing. And I wish I could channel that, so the next time I was just I started mouthing to myself and pretending to hear whatever kind of chanting or singing and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that was such a cool scene where he totally just blocks out everything.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, we won't belabor the point, and we won't try to do our probably very strange Scottish accents for you.
Yeah.
We might have 1 or 2 people that live in Scotland and listen to us, so
yeah.
I don't want to. I feel like I've already. Podrick is so lovely that he hasn't gotten offended by when we try to do Irish accents every now and then.
Yeah.
As far as I know,
I'm not going to try and do any accents because I just no.
No.
How about no, Scott?
No. Okay. How about no? I'll try that one.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
I practice a little bit every now and then. I listen to a lot of Greatest Generation. And,
yes.
And they're, I don't know if you guys have gotten up to the point where they have their new, she's been there for a while now. Wendy is their new editor and producer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of times when they, during their recording, ask her to do something that she clearly will not want to do, she puts in that sound bit.
Nice.
So like, well, we'll just have Wendy do this. And then you hear the sound recording. How about no?
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, well, in a few weeks we've got our Richard Nixon movie coming up, so we'll save our impersonations for Richard Nixon. We'll skip it over this time for the Scots.
Oy.
Yeah. I will say we're pulling back the curtain a little bit. We're actually recording this episode and that episode on the same evening, and before we started recording, we did actually try a couple of Richard Nixon impersonations.
I came into the party slightly late, and I felt like I was there were multiple, Richard Nixon people on the air as I came into the thing.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Yes.
Yeah. Bunch of tricky dicks. So, but that's a couple of weeks from now. So.
I don't know what to say to that.
I did a Ken. Yeah. So Rob Roy is our movie this time around. So it's an interesting thing about 1995, and my wife and I were talking about this when we were watching this movie the other night, is I feel like in every year, particularly it felt like maybe in the 90s, that somebody got a bee in their bonnet is not the right phrase. Somebody got something trapped somewhere, and they're like, I want to hear a Scottish story. Mm-hmm. And so as they started to kind of share some of these script ideas around Hollywood, I'm sure somebody was like, I would love to have a revolutionary Scottish story, a little bit of love story built into it, maybe some revenge, and then somebody was like, oh yeah, I read one of those last week. It's Braveheart. They're doing that over here at this studio, and Mel Gibson's got it. And I'm like, well, I want my Scottish story.
Right.
And the same thing. And like, it seems like the years when you have like the big Western movie, there's at least two or three Western movies that seem very, very similar.
Right.
Like somehow you have a Wyatt Earp. You have multiple Wyatt Earp movies within like a 1 year span.
Which is nuts when you think about it.
Right. Or multiple Robin Hood movies, or multiple, I don't know, pick something.
Yeah.
But I feel like Hollywood gets on these themes and they're like, well, they got one. I want one.
It's totally like right out of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back when he's like, suddenly, comic book movies became hot property, and Hollywood studios started to, snap them up as quickly as possible. And, we optioned Blunt Man and Chronic.
Right.
Now, the hard part is making that reference is after the whole Marvel and DCEU and all this kind of stuff. But when that movie came out, that was still kind of pre all of the actual comic book movies going crazy.
Right.
And was exactly what you say. It was like, hey, we're doing songs of Scottish Rebellion movies of Scottish Rebellion. Okay. We're going to hear our stories. And,
that would be a fun album.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Scottish Rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
That should be a band name if it's not.
Now that's what I call Bagpipes 24.
Oh,
So, John, I will just say, in the music libraries of your district school, we have multiple Scottish bagpipe tunes arranged for band.
Are you allowed to play them?
We are allowed to play them.
That's good.
Yeah, we are, we are full.
I didn't know if these were outlawed tunes on outlawed pipes.
So, John, I'm just going to ask you to think of your music department.
Yes, I always do.
As a district whole.
Yes. Yes.
And basically playing outlawed songs and songs of rebellion are kind of like, is that far out of our wheelhouse? Number one.
Oh yeah.
And number two, we actually have a tune, different part of the British Isles, but we actually have a song called Songs of Welsh Rebellion.
Oh. And
actually I'll have to share those with you because there's some There's some pretty cool. There's some are like Scottish bagpipe tunes put together, and then the songs of Welsh rebellion are like ancient folk tunes about like Welsh heroes, and
I'm sure the overuse of consonants is just going to be outstanding.
Yes,
not a vowel to be seen in sight.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's incredible music. I totally digressed. I can't remember exactly, what's going on. But songs of rebellion and Scottish and all that kind of stuff.
Songs of Welsh rebellion. That sounds exciting.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get that from you because I'm the guy who every once in a while somebody will walk into my office and I'm either playing bagpipes or what was I doing the other day? I was playing Viking music the other day.
Nice.
That was, and the person walked in. They're like, "You find this soothing?"
Yes.
And I was like, yes, it was before you came in the room.
Hey, you can't hold on a second, but you can't be ripping on bagpipe music.
No, they were ripping on the Viking music.
Oh, Viking music. Okay.
Yeah, which I wouldn't rip on the Viking music either.
I wouldn't either. Is that like Klingon opera?
Sometimes I feel like it's maybe a cross between Klingon opera and Enya.
Okay.
There's some chanting going on, but a lot of it is very guttural.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's like that Klingon battle song that they all played, when they were going into battle. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I wouldn't be shocked if somebody, like if I had, what was the service that would it would pick your next song for you? Pandora. Mm-hmm. Like back in the day, I wouldn't be surprised if Pandora synced up some Viking music with a little meloda.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I bet Worf would have listened to Viking music.
Yeah.
Delicious. This is a warrior song.
A warrior song, yes.
Prune juice. All right. On that note, Rob Roy. We spoil freely here, so just be warned if we start to talk about a movie and you don't want to hear about it, just do a little skippy a couple times, and then
skippity,
a little skippity, not skippity, skippity. Oh. We did this last time, didn't we? Like I feel like this. Yeah. This was a problem.
This sounds familiar.
This was a problem. Yes.
When you said skippy, I didn't think skippity. I heard more, wipey.
Oh well, there's that too, I guess. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. To each their own.
Indeed.
That's right.
You're keeping up the good fight and singing Songs of Rebellion, so I won't criticize you, Pat.
Oh, there it is.
You do whatever you want to do.
You do you, man.
You do you, boo.
Ooh, boo even.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like after 10 years we've reached that point.
It has gone there.
Mm-hmm. If you want a place that's less awkward than this place right now, head over to 30podcast.com and you can leave a rating, a voicemail. You could become a co-executive producer via Patreon over there and get some of our bonus content that you can find there. I also want to put a quick little shout out. We have been I know a lot of people use YouTube to listen to podcasts, so we have been putting all of our episodes over there on YouTube. You can find us at 30 podcast, 30 and podcast on YouTube. That's our channel. And I believe at this point, unless they've been blocked because there was some music that we had included in old episodes, a bunch of our episodes should be there on YouTube. I did try to get as many as possible up there. And so some of them, as long as they have not been blocked for including some of that content, then you'll be able to find them over on YouTube. So go check that out when you've got a moment. All right, Rob Roy. This one came out on April 14th, 1995, rated R. Runtime of 2 hours, 19 minutes, directed by Michael Caton Jones, who did This Boy's Life and The Jackal. Writer was Alan Sharp, who did Night Moves and The Osterman Weekend, which is a weird offshoot of Weekend at Bernie's. Like, very, very different. I found there was not a lot that it had in common, so very strange that it's part of that shared universe. Producers were Peter Brauhan and Richard Jackson. They did The Flying Scotsman, The Slab Boys, Restoration, and The Jackal. Composer was Carter Burwell, who did Fargo and Twilight. Cinematographer was Carl Walter Lindenlaub, who did Stargate and Independence Day. Editor was Peter Honus, who did LA Confidential and The Quick and the Dead. Production company was United Artists. Budget was $28 million. Box office was $58.7 million. Flick Metrics gives it a 65. Cinema Score gives it a B+. Liam Neeson, who played Rob Roy McGregor, has a very particular set of skills. I will find you. I will kill you. I want to see him. I'm trying to think. I want to see some kind of a movie where he, like a Freddy versus Jason kind of situation, but it's him and Harrison Ford. I almost just want the two of them like in a growl off, just to see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, kid. I've taken your daughter. I've got a very particular set of skills. I will find you, Han Solo. I will kill you. Yeah, I would love to see that. I'm going to make that happen. Once I win the 1 billion lottery, I'm going to make that happen. So he played Rob Roy McGregor, Schindler's List, and Taken. Jessica Lange was Mary McGregor. She was in Tootsie and Blue Sky. John Hurt, who passed in 2017, played the Marquis of Montrose. Marquis of Montrose. He was in The Elephant Man and Alien. Or would it be more appropriate to say Alien was in him?
Ooh.
We incepted that movie.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Tim Roth was Archibald Cunningham, which I believe might be related to Richie Cunningham, which is another callback to Austin Powers that does not actually exist. He was in Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. Eric Stoltz was Alan MacDonald, one of the great Scottish actors, Eric Stoltz. He was also in Pulp Fiction and Mask. Andrew Keir, who died in 1997, played the Duke of Argyll. He was in The Viking Queen and Quatermass and The Pit. Brian Cox was Killearn. He was in Braveheart and The Bourne Identity. Brian McCarty was Alistair McGregor. He was in Speed 2, Cruise Control, and The Ghost in the Darkness. Jason Fleming was Gregor. He was in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Ewan Stewart was Cole. He was in Titanic and Valhalla Rising. David Heyman was Tam Sibbalt, who had a knife in his belly, and he was also in Sid and Nancy and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Let's see. There's just a ton of people that were in this movie. I'm only going to read off a couple of other ones. Let's do... let's see. Well, there are a bunch of people that were in Braveheart. Gilly Gilchrist played Ian, was in Braveheart and The Angels Share. John Murtaugh played the referee for the fight, was in Braveheart. There was a ton of people in here. Gilbert Martin, the one guy that was fighting everybody, Guthrie. He was in Braveheart and The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc. So yeah, tons of people that were Braveheart actors and have worked obviously in other Scottish movies. Guthrie's Guthrie. I just keep going Guthrie like he's German or something. Guthrie's opponent was played by Richard Bonehill, who was in Flash Gordon and Star Wars Episode 6: The Return of the Jedi. So some fun connections there. A couple of quick trivia things before we get on into this one. Tim Roth thought that he was going to get fired for making Archibald Cunningham a little too eccentric, and even asked his agent to look for other roles because he thought that was going to be the end of his time on this movie. However, the director encouraged him to lean into the kind of campy, eccentric portrayal, which ultimately ended up earning him an Oscar nomination. So that was fun. The movie was shot entirely on location in Scotland, and a lot of scenes were filmed in remote parts of the Highlands that were accessible only by helicopter. So that made that a bit of a challenge, but beautiful, very beautiful scenery. I would be happy to be a part of this movie, and
indeed,
yeah. Let's see what else we got. The fine Highland weather was a challenge at times. There were times where there was nonstop rain and swarms of midges, which is never what you want.
Wait, swarms of midgets? What?
No, I didn't say midgets.
Oh.
That's a different movie. That's called Willow. That was several years ago.
Got it.
Yeah. No, midges, like little flies, like little gnat kind of things. Yeah. Yes, it's a very different movie if it was a different word. Let's see. Brian Cox apparently didn't get along very well with the director of this one. They had a different cinematographer at one point, and Michael Caton Jones, the director, fired him, and Brian Cox was either had worked with him or was friends with him and was not very happy about that. So that was a little bit of contention. We can talk about this a little bit later. I was kind of interested to see this in the listing of some of the trivia. The final sword fight between Rob Roy, Liam Neeson, and Archibald Cunningham, Tim Roth, is often hailed as one of the greatest sword fights ever filmed due to its gritty realism and emotional intensity. So we can talk about that a little bit later, because it's a good sword fight. I don't know. Maybe we'll see how you guys feel. I don't know if I list it as one of the greatest ever filmed, but...
Yeah, that seems maybe too far.
Seems a bit, maybe a bit exaggerated.
Yeah,
just a tad. Yeah, that's about it for the trivia piece of it. But we can discuss that a little bit later. All right, our voiceover synopsis. I don't know if maybe I should do this in a Liam Neeson voice rather than a Don LaFontaine voice.
There you go.
In the rugged Scottish Highlands, Rob Roy McGregor fights to protect his honor and family from the cruel Archibald Cunningham. Under the thumb of the ruthless Marquis of Montrose, with Mary by his side, Rob battles betrayal, corruption, and one final duel for his life. We'll find him, and we'll kill him, but it is a tale of loyalty, love, and legendary valor. That was more Irish, Liam Neeson. It was a little Irish tinge to that one, but we do what we can. All right, major moments for this one. We break it down into 10 major moments, so you don't have to, because who wants to do homework when you're listening to a podcast? Moment number 1, the struggles of Clan MacGregor. Set in 1713 Scotland, the film opens up with Rob Roy McGregor leading Clan MacGregor in the Highlands. Struggling to feed his people while providing protection against cattle rustling, Rob borrows £1,000 from the Marquis of Montrose to become a cattle trader and alleviate the clan's poverty. Poverty? That's when you don't have enough property.
I suppose maybe they have that too.
You have poverty, yes.
Yeah.
Or when you're really good at being poor, you're not an amateur. You're a pro. Poverty. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or I could just learn to talk.
Well, yeah, but where's the fun in that?
I don't know. You know, weird, the idea of being able to talk and having a podcast.
Right?
We've been doing this for 10 years, folks. I know what I'm doing.
You might not know it, but that's okay.
Golly, surprise, surprise, surprise. We've been doing it for 10 years. Gomer, is that you? Okay. And scene. Got stuck there a little bit. Pat, you might be talking. Your lips are moving, but I can't hear you.
Oh, for crying out loud! What decade is this? I was going to say
we've been doing this for 10 years, folks, and we know how to use a microphone.
We swears we does.
This is going to become like the Prince of Thieves Robin Hood accents, where like Gomer Pyle and Roscoe P. Coltrane show up in feudal Scotland.
Oh yeah,
and that
would be a great movie. I'm Gomer McPyle.
I was going to say, like, I can think of any number of scenes in Braveheart when, they use some kind of battlefield tactic to surprise the English. And it's going to, when spoilers for Braveheart, go back and listen to our episode from like a week ago or whenever it was. And it's like when they pull up all the spears, surprise, surprise, surprise. So.
Surprise, surprise, surprise. Lyndon, why'd you... Nope. Okay.
Okay, John. Okay.
Give it a couple weeks. He's going to come up in Nixon.
Yeah.
We're going to have a problem there, too.
Yes, you will.
Yes. Richie Cunningham and his wife, Oprah. He is a skilled but arrogant swordsman fleeing some legal troubles in England, arrives to stay with Montrose. Cunningham's effeminate demeanor and sharp skills attract some challenges, but that allows Montrose to profit by betting on his victories because he done beats everyone he fights. Cunningham soon becomes a central figure in this unfolding drama as he gets himself in league with Killearn, who's going to cause some issues here fairly soon. Cunningham learns about Rob's loan through Montrose's scheming factor, Killearn. He murders Rob's friend Alan MacDonald, as we mentioned before, the great Scottish actor Eric Stoltz. Was excited to see his obviously very natural, very long red Scottish hair there.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm just going to say, great character actor that plays, and I forget the name, not Montrose, who's like he's the Scot that's not quite the high up guy, but he ends up being kind of the sidekick to
Calern?
Yeah.
Brian Cox.
That guy, whenever we're playing like a period piece and need like the scheming, conniving guy, it's like him. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he's both
central casting.
He's both in these last two movies we've done. Like last week was Braveheart, and then this week he was in this one. He's Calern, and then last week he was Uncle Argyle.
That's true. Okay, so that's right. He plays the good guy in that one.
Yeah, that is something we shall have to
then
remedy.
what else? But then in the movie Troy, I think he plays a scheming leader.
He is in Troy. What does he play in Troy?
Agamemnon.
Yes.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
Agamemnon.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was William Stryker in the X-Men movies.
That's right.
I have not watched the TV show Succession. Did you guys watch any of that?
No.
No, but it's on our list.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
He plays one of the major characters in that series too.
And I'm just saying, Argyle, because there's an Argyle in this movie, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there was an Argyle in Braveheart.
There was the Duke of Argyle in this movie.
Yeah. And then there was his uncle Argyle in Braveheart.
Yeah.
And if you've seen Die Hard, there's a character named Argyle. So there's a good chance that this is canonical Die Hard.
And I believe that Kevin Bacon has a pair of Argyle socks. So you can
connections.
You can connect
are unlimited.
You can connect the 18th century Jacobite rebellion in Scotland to Kevin Bacon.
Yes,
we've done it. Thanks, everybody. That's been 10 years of the podcast. We've reached peak podcast where we have completed a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon on the show.
I'm just wondering how many major moments have we gotten through, and we're already on Kevin Bacon and canonical Die Hard.
I
think we've had one.
We're halfway through moment number 3.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself and not talk.
We're further.
Let's get at least.
We're further than you think, but not as far as you might think we should be.
Hope.
Yeah, you know.
We're at the point of the podcast that you deserve, not the point of the podcast that you want.
Pat, podcasts are built on hope.
Yes.
I learned this from Star Wars.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Where were we at? He learns about Rob's loan through Montrose's scheming factor, Calern, murders his friend Alec McDonald, steals the money, setting Rob in a collision course with Montrose and Cunningham. Rob pleads for time to recover the stolen funds, but Montrose offers to waive the debt only if Rob falsely accuses his rival, the Duke of Argyle, of being a Jacobite. Rob refuses, preserving his honor but incurring Montrose's wrath. Montrose seizes Rob's land to settle the debt and declares him an outlaw. Redcoats burn his croft, slaughter his cattle, and send Cunningham to capture him, broken but not dead. Rob does go into hiding, and Cunningham rapes Mary, Rob's wife, to flush him out. Mary, with her brother-in-law Alistair's help, conceals the assault from Rob. I'm going to stop there for a second. That's one of the rougher scenes in this movie, when you have the attack on Rob's home and kind of the subsequent scene where she's basically grabbing her brother-in-law and saying, look, if I can bear this, then you can shut up about it. Because if he knows, he's just going to get himself killed.
Yes. Whole, yes. That is a very much a rough watch.
Yeah.
Exactly like you said.
Yeah. Mary shows some resilience by confronting the trauma of her assault while protecting her family, but Cunningham continues to display his cruelty. Betty, a maidservant that is now carrying Cunningham's child, is dismissed from Montrose's estate and rejected by Cunningham, so she's basically left out to fend for herself, and at this time and place, an unwed, pregnant young woman would not have a lot of prospects. So she goes and seeks refuge with the McGregor family, and Betty reveals Cunningham's and Calern's plot to steal the money. So Mary finds out about it. To build a case against Cunningham, Rob abducts Calern, imprisons him. When Calern taunts Mary about her assault and threatens to reveal that her unborn child might be Cunningham's, Mary and Alistair kill him to protect their secret. Montrose ends up escalating his campaign against Robb by sending Cunningham and Redcoats to burn the clan's homes. During a skirmish, Alistair attempts to snipe Cunningham, but inadvertently kills one of the Redcoats. He and another clansman, Cole, are executed, and Alistair in his final moments reveals to Robb the truth about Mary's assault. Robb is captured, accused Cunningham of murder, theft, and rape, all of which Cunningham arrogantly confirms. Despite being tortured, Robb remains defiant. Montrose orders him hanged, but Robb uses the execution rope to strangle Cunningham and escapes when the rope is cut to save Cunningham's life. That I thought was a fun scene. It was like it's one of these scenes where it's how's he going to get out of this one? Like he's surrounded, there's nowhere to go, and then he grabs that rope, swings it around his neck, and then jumps over the side of the bridge there, and there's a great escape scene.
And I want to throw in here again, spoilers for Braveheart. Spoilers for our Braveheart episode.
Yes.
This is the escape and happy ending that I think we all wanted at the end of Braveheart. And I know Dennis and I talked a lot about it. Like, I want to watch Braveheart, and he survives at the end. This was the escape we wanted at the end of Braveheart. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, yeah. So that was yes.
Yeah. Mary gains an audience with the Duke of Argyll and exposes Montrose's plan to frame him as a Jacobite. Impressed by Robb's integrity, Argyll then offers the McGregors asylum and arranges a duel between Robb and Cunningham to settle Montrose's vendetta. In a climactic duel, Robb, wielding a heavy broadsword, faces Cunningham armed with a light, swift rapier. Cunningham repeatedly wounds Robb, appearing to have the upper hand. However, Robb seizes his blade with his hand, immobilizing him, and delivers a fatal blow. Robb wins the duel, clearing his debts, restoring his honor. He returns home to Mary, ready to raise her child as his own. That is the 10 major moments. I think I covered pretty much everything. All the major moments in this one. So yeah, go ahead.
I've got, did we ever establish, because there's never any way to know whether the child is his or Cunningham's, right?
There would likely be no way to know at that period in time because
yeah, that's true.
They had enjoyed each other's company several times earlier in the movie. So right. without knowing the time frames of all of that, I think the movie seems to assume that it could be Cunningham's, but they seem to be, Mr. and Mrs. McGregor seem to be very friendly with each other.
Well, and that leads me to my other point.
So I'm just saying,
keeping it family friendly, like, holy Moses, that's a way to keep things happy in the home and in the marriage. I'll tell you that whole, yes.
No. So I'm just gonna say no way to know is what we can probably. The movie wants us. I think the movie wants us to think that it's Cunningham's.
Okay, to bring out Rob Roy's just nobility, like
right.
Yeah.
By the time we reach the end of the movie, the message is we don't really care.
Now, I have a quick question about Scottish history.
Yes.
And I'm going to fully say that I should be more read up on it or just remember my history. Jacobite.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit in? Was that like a religious, or was that a like some kind of a political group? Because I kept getting it messed up with the French in my mind, because it used to be the Jacobin and Girondist, right? Wasn't that the two of the factions in the French, like right around the Terror?
Yeah.
What is Jacobite in terms of Scottish history?
Mm-hmm. So basically, I did a quick Google for your question about the Jacobites and the Jacobins. Mm-hmm. That the Jacobins were during the French Revolution. Okay. And they were constitutionalists who supported the rights of man.
Okay.
Whereas the Jacobites, it was, they kind of had a belief that kings, as a lot of people did back then, that kings were appointed by God. And that if there wasn't a legitimate claim to a throne that seemed to be like it was appointed by God, then it wasn't a legitimate claim. And so a lot of that kind of stems from James II in Scotland and his descendants who are called the Stuarts. There was a revolution in the late 1600s that took place, and then throughout a lot of the 1700s, there were several Jacobite rebellions, and the idea was it was like this series of uprisings in that 18th century kind of time period that was supposed to restore the House of Stuart to the throne.
Okay, gotcha. Because the people believed that the Stuarts had the religious claim, or the divine claim.
Yeah. And not just claim to and that's why a lot of this was happening in Scotland, because it was a Scottish king. But the idea is that he didn't just have the rights to the throne of Scotland, he had rights to the throne of England.
Okay.
And the idea was
because the Stuarts.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you.
No. So the idea was if the Scots could get one of their own on the British throne, then obviously you'd have you wouldn't have the same issues that you'd been having for centuries, like what we saw in Braveheart, which takes place in the 1300s. So like 400 years before this. The idea was, oh man, if we could get one of ours on a British throne, that is awesome for Scotland. Like that solves a lot of our problems.
Got it. And so that's where the Stuarts, but wasn't that like the Tudors took over kind of after the Stuarts, right? Didn't things switch to that line? And then that was like Henry VIII and Elizabeth. And I know I'm skipping over because wasn't there was a Queen Mary in there. Mm-hmm. And then there was Mary Queen of Scots. So there was some of that, or was that earlier? And that was some of the Stuart line coming over.
Yeah. During the Jacobite rebellion, or the different kind of uprisings that they had, there were several different British monarchs that were around during that time. A lot of them named James. I think there was a Charles and a Henry in there somewhere, but there were several Jameses that were in there. I'm trying to remember. I want to say one of the Marys was before all of that, because she had ties to Scotland. I start to get it kind of jumbled in my head.
Yeah.
We need to go back to King Ralph, where he had the way to remember the kings. Remember?
Exactly. Right. I need my King Ralph encyclopedia.
Exactly. King Ralph Wikipedia.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
I do remember the family that had been on the throne that the Stuarts were trying to depose were the Hanovers.
Right.
Okay.
And that's about where I start to lose, who is who and what the order is of the different British monarchs. But that's basically the Hanover family had been like how the current British family are the Windsors. The Hanover family had taken over the throne, where the Stuarts thought they had the rightful claim and the godly claim to the throne, and that's why you had this series of uprisings.
Well, I mean, everyone thinks they have the right claim.
Right.
And no one seemed to be in this movie wanted to be accused of being a Jacobite, right?
Right, because the idea was they were the rebels. They were not the ruling party. They weren't the ruling group. So if you were, British, as we saw in Braveheart, which again is like 400 years before this story, they pretty firmly entrenched a lot of British nobles in the whether they did it through prima nocta or what, which we learned last week might not have been real. That yes, you would have had a lot of the nobles in Scotland would have been British, and so the idea that they had been put in place by either the Hanovers or descendants of the Hanovers or ancestors of the Hanovers, they were going to be very much unlikely to support any of the Jacobites.
Got it. And that's where, and my last question that I had was, that's kind of how this, obviously much of this is fictionalized accounts. In the Braveheart, it was a fictionalized story, yada, yada, yada. But that's where this seemed to kind of like slot in, was the Scottish or the nobility being portrayed in this. I mean, it all, like, much of that seemed to be Scottish, but it was sort of like the common people versus the nobles that were kind of, running rampant a little bit with their behavior and so forth.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely a ruling class versus the commoner, commoner class in this one.
Yeah.
But it was all within like Scottish.
Yes.
Scottish culture or the Scottish nation or so forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Yeah. So anyways, those were just some of my questions / observations on the Scottish bit.
Okay. All right. Well, that may help us as we transition into some deeper thoughts here, because maybe we have some thoughts about the historicity of all this and the accuracy and those type of things, and we'll talk about it.
And now, Deep Thoughts.
I have an opinion on this matter.
Don't mince words, Bones. What do you really think?
I like it a lot.
Wow. It's very deep. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to ask it a little differently than I usually do because we did Braveheart last week. So I'm going to ask this question. Did you like this movie, and which do you like better between the two? Between Braveheart and Rob Roy?
I liked it fine. It wasn't one I'm going to pop in the old streaming player every year or anything. Which one? I think I liked this one better, but for the wrong reasons.
All right. Elaborate.
The comedic factor that Eli Roth brings to that character is almost enough, and the mustache twirling villain of the other guy is almost enough to bring me back to this. Again, for the wrong reasons. Like, I'm not flocking to this because it's a better film or a better story, but it's the foils and the secondary characters that to me make this more amusing and maybe more rewatchable, if nothing else.
Yeah.
How about that for?
So you're saying Braveheart needed a Richie Cunningham?
Sure, why not?
Okay. I can see that. Patrick, what are your thoughts?
In answer to your questions, I say yes.
The correct pronunciation is I.
I like this movie. So I'm kind of chuckling because I saw this and Michael Collins within very close proximity. So it's funny because in my mind, I know like completely different nations, completely different,
Are you taking
time periods.
You're taking part in a Liam Neeson film festival?
It was, that was it. Like portraying Celtic revolutionaries.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, so like the stories were intertwined. But I remember this is, I think, maybe the second time I've seen this movie.
Okay.
And I really, really liked it a whole lot. I like it a whole lot. It's a great film. I love Braveheart. It's a great film. And I think everything Bo said, and I've said this before, I love discussing movies with you because Bo, you are able to, in such a concise, like not a lot of like superfluous words, able to like get right to the point. And so everything that you said, I just completely agree with. I'm going to throw a bunch of superfluous words at it. The way the characters are brought to life are like the hero is noble and a hero and just epic. The bad guy is like the mustache twirling bad guy. The setting, the scene, the scenery is just beautiful. The relationship that he has with his wife is one of, I'll just say, utmost, passion, humor, respect. And it's just, storybook. And so which one do I like better between this one and Braveheart? I'm going to say yes, because they're both fantastic movies. But the way they go about it, because everything I described, I feel like you could say the same with Braveheart as well. Mustache twirling bad guy, relationship of great passion, but I feel like the way they execute it is not literally execute, but I mean, the way they tell the story they just go about it in different ways, and both are interesting. They're different, and I think both are just fascinating movies to watch. Just great stories, great tales, you know.
So my take on this one is, I'm going to say, yes, I do enjoy this movie. I definitely like Braveheart better than this movie. And some of my reasons are some things that you guys brought up. I will admit that Braveheart, one thing that this movie has over Braveheart, and I don't see that as a fault of Braveheart, but I can see that as something that maybe would have helped improve Braveheart a bit. I don't necessarily need it in my watching of Braveheart, but this movie has a clear villain, and a clear villain that Liam Neeson's character gets to fight. Whereas in Braveheart, he's fighting the British Army. He's fighting Edward the Longshanks, but he never actually meets Edward the Longshanks, so they don't face off against each other. So I can see that you've got this historical epic and you have this sword fight at the end, and it's kind of like the dramatic duel at the end of a movie where the guy who has wronged you get to face off against him. In Braveheart, you don't really have that. Like, the guy who wronged him in Braveheart, he very quickly slits his throat, and we're only a third of the way into the movie at that point. So for the rest of the movie, he's fighting the English, but he's not necessarily, he never actually faces off against Edward the Longshanks. In this movie, you do get that clear cut, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy. I get to watch them fight each other to the death at the end of this movie. So perhaps something like that maybe gives, in terms of a action or adventure type movie, gives this a little bit of an edge over something like a Braveheart. Neither of these movies in any way, shape, or form is historically accurate at all when it comes to...
You don't say.
Right. I didn't say. But I do feel like there are aspects to the story of this movie that the cinematography makes this movie feel epic when this movie really is not epic. Like, visually, it is. It's beautiful. Like, you got the sweeping vistas of the Scottish Highlands. It's beautiful. But it's a really small story. It's a small story about like a Robin Hood type story, the reverse Robin Hood. The money is stolen from the poor, and they have to try to figure out and get revenge on it. But it's a really small, compact story. Whereas the story of Rob Roy and kind of what made him famous was his involvement in the Jacobite uprisings and in battles, and as he was already an outlaw. Like, he comes across as a very noble guy in this movie because they make him so. The actual Rob Roy, I don't really think was. I mean, he, like the actual Braveheart, like, he was not the fine, upstanding citizen that, the movie kind of makes him out to be. Sure, I bet there was probably a bit of a sense of honor and romanticism for both of these characters, but they also were, they had some stuff where they were kind of some shady dudes. Which is an actual Scottish term too. I think I prefer Braveheart between the two movies because Braveheart is like this sweeping epic. You have these massive battle scenes. You have, it ranges from, you're in London one moment and people are traveling, the king has gone to France and he's come back, and now we've got intrigue going on and these battle scenes and the intrigue within the Scottish court itself with Robert the Bruce. And in this movie, it's really just somebody stole our money. We don't know who. We got to try to figure it out. Where did our guy go? Did he betray us? So, and I'm not saying that that's not a good story. It's just a much smaller story. And I feel like in some ways, I don't know if this is true, but in some ways, if this movie's coming out the same year as Braveheart, I feel like it wants to compete with Braveheart, but it's not stepping up to the same level as Braveheart. I'm thinking if for folks that have been watching college football, I'm thinking Braveheart may be the Division I football team. This seems a little bit more maybe like a Division II or Division III in terms of how it's approaching the story and approaching the subject matter. And some of the things that I think, if you're going to use a historical figure like Rob Roy, I think you got to include more of what was included in what made him famous in history. And this movie really doesn't do that. So that's it's a fine movie. I enjoy it. It's like Bo said, it's not one I'm necessarily going to go back to every year and put it on. My wife even told me, she's like, yeah, I think I maybe watched this when I was looking for Scottish stuff like a few months ago. So unless you're in the mood for some Scottish stuff or something like that, I probably, given the choice between another movie that is, 2+ whatever hours long, I'm probably going to go with Braveheart, or I'm probably going to watch something else. But I have seen this movie 3 times at this point, I think. So it's not like I haven't, it's not like I watched it once and I was like, nah, never again. I clearly enjoy this movie because I've watched it multiple times. The actors in this are amazing, just like the actors are amazing in Braveheart as well. But I do like Jessica Lange's character more so as like the love interest, because she's not just a love interest. I could fully see her picking up a sword and dueling Cunningham at the end of this movie if she really wanted to. She's a tough lady, and I would not mess with her at all. And that's not a knock on the love interest in Braveheart, but it's just very, very different. His love interests are a princess, and they're in different places. But I think that's what's interesting to me about this one is she's a more interesting character than Murren in the beginning of Braveheart. And that's not Murren's fault. She didn't have time. She was executed. Didn't have time to be a more interesting character. And I still enjoy her character in Braveheart, but I'm just saying I think Mary is a more interesting character in this movie.
Well, and the relationship in Braveheart never gets past that initial stage.
Right. Whereas these guys have been together for a while.
They've been married. Yeah. And so you get to see the different aspects of that. And so I'm going to relate this. I'm going to relate this to race cars. These 2 movies to race cars. Sorry, everybody.
You don't say.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like when you're sitting there and not me, because I'm not an intelligent person, but you're listening to a team of engineers talk about how they designed the race car for that year, and they talk about like Grand Prix cars, right? And it's all a matter of engineering solutions to the problem presented by the current formula. And you when you can go back and look at, like, let's say 2 different teams. They're both building to fit the same formula, but the way they go about engineering the car and designing the car, it's different solutions for the same problem, right? And any engineers out there, if I've got that wrong, please tell me how I got it wrong. Write your answer on a PlayStation 5 and send it to the pod. But that's kind of what I feel about these movies is they're both trying to tell a similar story or for lack of a better term, I'll just say it. They're both trying to solve the same problem, solve the same riddle, but the way they engineer it is different. And I can't find which one is right or which one is wrong. I kind of like them both. And for me, it's like, okay, what am I going to be, in the mood for? And I just, like you talked about the 2 different relationships, I absolutely love the way that they build the relationship, the husband and wife. I mean, the one scene when, my God, he goes swimming in the lock, and then, or I don't know if that would be a lock or if that would be and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I want to live there and I want to swim there every morning. That looks fantastic. And again, I'm trying to keep it family friendly, but he goes, the wife, and suddenly that's the conversation. I'm like, okay, well, things are firing on all cylinders in this house. And which is great, happy for him. And but then later they're talking, and so you're going into a business deal? And he goes, well, yeah. And then they're going back and forth. And I wish I had the line, but he looks at her, and it's like, I think I'm going to be using this. And it was basically to the thing is, I didn't tell you my plan to be ridiculed. I'm just trying to tell you my thoughts or something. And the way it's okay. I mean, it's just that relationship, they just bring it to life so well, if we can find that line, we'll have to edit that in, because that it was a great line when they're walking up. It's early in the movie and they're walking, and it was, and she starts questioning me. He's like, I didn't tell you my thoughts to be ridiculed. I told you my thoughts, or I let you know what I was doing to tell you my thoughts or whatever. The line you're looking for is, keep that tongue for your boys, woman. I didn't tell you my mind to be flayed for it. That's right. I told you to. Yeah, exactly.
And then her response is, I love the bones of you, Robert McGregor, but you take too much to heart and cannot be helped. It must be helped.
Yeah.
All right, but not today.
Yeah. And so I think it's, and as far as, and I'm sure we, like the historical accuracy, I kind of feel this with all the movies, and I don't want to be that guy. And I know there's some movies I really bump on with, like, what are we doing with and I don't know if it's just that these are stories that aren't necessarily, the culture I grew up in. I mean, I didn't grow up in, feudal Scotland and all that. But I go back and forth. Like, in one sense, I'm like, these are such great stories that they're telling. So, okay, let's give them a pass on the historical accuracy / inaccuracy. But in the same token, it's like, why not just kind of change the names and just say you're telling historical fiction set in this time period? Do you know what I'm saying? And I personally, and not trying to say makes it a bad movie, but like for me, I think the movie Gladiator like knocks that out of the park. They mention some names, but it's basically a story that just is all fictional characters kind of thing. The leads for the most part. And that's kind of where I get with the fiction. Like, hey, I love the stories. It's great. But then there's always part of me that's like, man, make a movie about the real Rob Roy. Make a movie about the real William Wallace, and you're going to have and then if you want to make like the historical fiction romantic story and all that, like you can make that, just change the name slightly. Do you know what I'm saying? Not that that's taken anything away, but that's always where it's always kind of that, okay, I do the double take when you hear about the historical inaccuracy.
Well, and unless you know who Rob Roy is, I don't picture American audiences just through word of mouth. If somebody says, "Oh, there's a new movie called Rob Roy," okay, or there's a new movie called Braveheart. Ooh, that sounds interesting.
Right.
Like I think part of that too, maybe the marketing piece of it, because I was looking back, I was like, what did we say last week? Worldwide box office. What did I say for this one? Like 57 million, 58.7 million for this one. And it was 213 million for Braveheart.
Right.
So part of it could be, Braveheart came out in May of 95. This one came out in April of 95. So they're really close to each other. Actually, this one came out about a month before Braveheart came out. So part of what I'm wondering too is you have a movie called Rob Roy, and unless you know the historical Rob Roy, and if you know the historical Rob Roy, that's part of what I'm thinking is, if you know the historical Rob Roy, like the 10 people in the U.S. are going to know that, are you then going to see this movie expecting to see, I want to see him fighting in the uprisings. Like, I want to see him be a revolutionary in Scotland. And you go, and it's a little bit more, and I don't say this to belittle the movie, it's a little bit more of a love story, a little bit more of a soap opera with a, with a little bit of a mystery of some stolen gold going on there. And then a few weeks later, you've got another Scottish movie that comes out, and all of a sudden it's called Braveheart, and it's got Mel Gibson in it. And all of a sudden I'm wondering, does some of that word of mouth that started with Rob Roy, when people start saying that Scottish movie, do they lose some of that when a Braveheart comes out and people can be like, ooh, that sounds interesting? Because, I don't know, you hear the name Braveheart or you hear the name Gladiator, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Like Braveheart, not necessarily, but you kind of get a sense of, oh, that sounds inspiring. Whereas a Rob Roy, or even your earlier example of Michael Collins, like, unless you really know who those historical figures are, I don't know that name draws me to go see the movie if I didn't know it. Yeah. I don't know if that was part of the reason for it, but yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's funny because you say Michael Collins, and growing up with an Irish mother,
right?
I mean, and that's the thing. I laugh because, like, I remember, when I was telling my mom, like, hey, I watched Michael Collins. Michael, it's like, but you're exactly right. I wonder too, like, if we asked the movie makers and we said, what is your movie about? Like, and I always go back to, when Disney did not the Great Escape, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
They were like, when we sat down to make that, our goal was to make a prison break movie. That was what that movie basically, and I was like, oh, I just thought it was some cool, reimagine, but they're like, nope. When we took it from a book and made it a movie, that's what our thought was. This is going to be, right? Like when we talk about Star Trek and the Wrath of Khan, and you've said it, like, this is a submarine movie. Oh, okay. That's what, that's kind of how I wonder what they would say. Like, what is Rob Roy? Mm-hmm. And then what was Braveheart? Right? Like, I would just be like, how would they describe it? And I just would be curious to see if there was any of that would help inform kind of what we're watching in those things, Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like, some of these movies as they've come out, they're kind of based on maybe a book came out kind of close to the time. Mm-hmm. I was looking to see, if this one had a book that came out, or because sometimes it's even like a nonfiction book that comes out that ends up inspiring somebody, like somebody read a biography, and that kind of inspired them. I know that the ones that created Braveheart, that was kind of their thing. Like it was somebody who really just loved the history of Braveheart, and wanted to make sure they've made a movie about this because they got inspired about it. I was looking real quick to see if I could find something about Rob Roy and see if it was based on a book that got brought out at the time or something like that.
While you're searching that up, I'm going to throw this other thought out there to your question of, I think for our recording timeline, I would say the last couple of weeks to our release timeline, the last, month or so, what makes a 90s movie as opposed to an 80s movie? Because obviously just because it's 1990 or 91 doesn't mean suddenly these movies are 90s movies, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like these movies, this and Braveheart, are good examples in my mind of kind of, hey, we're in the 90s now. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit more of like epic kind of thing. I feel like that whole historical epic type thing is a little bit more of a indicative of like the 1990s. And then also kind of like the more serious, overtones of the film. Like, I just feel like the action from like the 80s movies and all that is going to be, I don't want to say fun because it can be dark and violent and all that. But earlier on the pod, we were talking about Die Hard, right? And Die Hard is very much an 80s movie, and the action is fun. And there's, it's supposed to be kind of tongue in cheek and all that. In this, there's action in there, but the action comes at a cost, right? Like in this movie, good characters are getting hurt. Good characters are getting killed. And there's legit bad things that happen. Like, the attack on his wife was, like we talked about at the beginning, that's a pretty tough watch. And I think that's kind of what happens when movies become more of the 90s movie is, you see some of those things that make it a little bit more riveting, a little bit more, not quite like fun action. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And again, I know this seems totally outside the thing to talk about comparison, but like, for example, in the movie Die Hard, spoilers for Die Hard, if I would have said, hey, there's going to be a scene where, John McClane's wife is assaulted, that would be like, no, that tonally does not fit with the movie Die Hard. Right. And yeah, some of the good characters, do get killed, but like there isn't necessarily an emotional, oh my gosh, that's going to stick with us. Right. That just tonally doesn't fit. However, if you would see, characters like being dispatched in this movie, but there wasn't any emotional, and we just kind of skipped over to the next fight scene, and there was some line like "Yippee-ki-yay," but that would be like, okay, well, that doesn't fit with that. This is that's a little bit too much fun. This isn't supposed to be fun. I think that's kind of one of the shifts that we have between the 80s and the 90s in terms of our action movies.
Yeah.
So something I was musing upon and wanted to throw out there.
Yeah. There was a novel from 1818 or 1817 that was called Rob Roy, and 1817 looks like, by Walter Scott. And it looks like this is that even in this story, Rob Roy, even though the book is titled Rob Roy, it looks like he's not the main character. Like, there is a narrator, he gets into some adventures, and his path crosses with Rob Roy at different times during the novel. But it's not like the movie does not have anything to do with this novel. Like, there's no plot similarities at all. It looks like there was also maybe an opera that was written at one point, a stage play. There was a 1953 movie that came out, and then there was the 1995 movie. I think the 1953 one was called, what was it? Rob Roy, the Highland Rogue, or something like that. So yeah, several different iterations of this, and apparently the Rob Roy cocktail that was created in New York to commemorate the opening of the operetta.
Yeah.
So if you ever wanted to know why it's called the Rob Roy,
now you know.
Now we know.
The more you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Knowing is half the beverage. Yeah. All right. Quick question before we get into three questions is, let's talk about the claim that was made about the sword fight at the end of this movie. I was reading, and Pat, you may have had to step away for a moment, but I was reading earlier, There was something in one of the trivia pieces that said they claim that this is one of the best sword fights ever filmed because of its realism and emotional grit. How do you feel about the sword fight at the end of this movie? I'm okay with it. I mean, I don't know that I'd say it's the best ever filmed or one of the best ever filmed, but it was fine.
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, it was fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Not being an expert in terms of sword fighting and all that kind of thing, I'm, totally qualified to answer this question. But I think when they talk about the realism, I'm often reminded of our esteemed colleague Dennis when we watch boxing movies.
Yeah.
And he'll talk about like the Rocky movies or the Creed movies, or any boxing movie, and it's sort of like, and he'll say like, okay, it's, a 13 round fight, and at the end of round 13 these guys are still like bam 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 bam, like going back and forth, and he's just like, yeah, that's not a fight, right? Like, that's not what really happens. And then he'll talk about certain movies where it's like, okay, this is a little bit more accurate. Like, these guys are tired, it's the pace of the mat, it slows down and so forth. And I think that's, I could see where that comes out, like in this movie, where, you have some pretty, in certain movies, you have like swashbuckling, incredible sword fights, just choreographed. And it's, just like beautiful, right? Just an incredible dance and fantastic. Or, hey, we'll talk like kung fu movies, right? Like incredibly well choreographed fight sequences that, just flow. And then you have fights that like maybe are a little bit more accurate to, this is kind of how it would really go down, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, they might not look as pretty, but it's a little bit more of, hey, this is kind of how this would really happen. And I think that's maybe possibly what the person making those claims are saying, is that, why this one is like right up there is maybe because it hit with that. And, I've talked to people that have talked about like being in a sword fight or a knife fight or something. And their thing was always, everyone gets cut. right? Like everyone's going to come out like bloodied, and that's just so. I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but I mean, I thought the fight scene for the movie really came about and was an excellent crescendo of the action. I thought it was neat to watch, and again, I just go back to, more fight scenes, more sword fights, more better, right? It's just it's this person's take on it, and it's no better or worse or less valid than the next person's, and it's yeah.
I think the only pieces I might have added to it would be, I mean, because when I think of, the problem is I start comparing it to other movies where maybe there's a revenge plot and somebody's got to, fight the person they're getting revenge on at the end. And I think of the 2002 Count of Monte Cristo, and I love the sword fight at the end of that movie when they're in the tall grasses outside of the ruined castle, and love the sword fight in that one. To me, that's like one of the pinnacles of a sword fighting scene. Then I think about like the lightsaber duels. And one of the things I thought about with this one is I was thinking, okay, go back to the original Star Wars, and you've got an old man fighting a giant cyborg. And compared to the other ones, there's not a lot of flipping and there's not a lot of, fancy sword play, but you have a 7-foot giant fighting an older man. And so they're fighting in maybe a little bit of a slower, more of like a samurai type style of sword fighting, which kind of fits with, Liam Neeson's size and the type of sword he's using versus Tim Roth's size and the type of sword he's using. The one thing I would add into it that I always kind of pull from Star Wars is, if this is a revenge thing, and if Richie Cunningham has been this arrogant, blusterous guy the entire movie, I want him talking a little bit more. Like, I want him kind of taunting Rob Roy a little bit more in this fight. It seems odd that he's mostly silent during the sword fight. I mean, it's okay. It still works fine, but it almost is like you've been this almost cartoonish mustache twirling bad guy for most of the movie. Like, let's keep that going. Like, I know your throat might still be recovering from having a rope around it, but I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit more of a jab at, I mean, he's got plenty of ammunition, plenty of ways that he's basically tried or succeeded to ruin the life of Rob Roy. He's got a lot of commentary he can use during the sword fight if he wants to. And that to me, in my watching of it, to me, I would like, that would have fit with his character for him to do that. And it might have made some of the moments, because there's some of the moments where this sword fight, there's a lot of gaps in between the sword fighting, and there's a lot of silence as they're kind of just pacing and back and forth and staring each other down and all that, which is fine. That's one way to do it. But I do feel like it, with the way the rest of the movie was and the way his character was in the rest of the movie, I would have loved to have seen a little bit more psychology, a little taunting there going on from his character. But yeah, that'd be about the only thing I might change. So, all right. Do we have any other thoughts about Rob Roy before we move on to 3 questions?
I don't know. Great movie, man. I loved it.
Good movie.
I'm glad it was on the list. I was
Agreed.
good reason to rewatch.
It's our Scottish twofer for the last 2 weeks. All right. 3 questions.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right. Question number 1. Let's say that Liam Neeson was going to play someone else in a historical revenge mashup. I gave you kind of a weird example of, let's say Abraham Lincoln comes back to life to track down John Wilkes Booth. And it's kind of a Taken style movie or something like that, where, Liam Neeson is Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth hunter, and goes after him. and you have a scene much like this movie where he has a particular set of skills and he will find you and he will kill you. Let's say we could take another historical figure that needs to get revenge on someone. What would you choose for Liam Neeson? What would his part be?
I'm going to need a second because honestly, John, I think I did a mashup of the 3 questions for this and the 3 questions for Nixon movie. And I think I have an answer that makes absolutely no sense because I just created a weird mashup in my mind. So
if Rob Roy was going to fight Richard Nixon.
No, I totally invented my own question, which I can't. It is so convoluted. Okay, so you guys go first.
In Pat fashion, by inventing his own question, he has rejected yours.
I do believe so. Pat just rejected your question.
I somehow I can't even describe to you what I thought the question was. You guys go first. So Liam Neeson, historical epic. Which one do I want to see? So, okay, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to scramble. I'm going to do a little bit of last minute, and you guys go first.
Okay. All right. Bo, what have you got?
Julius Caesar comes back to whack on Brutus and Cassius because, that's fun.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, I have a particular set of skills. And I was thrice offered a kingly crown, which I did thrice refuse. I will find you. I will stab you 20 or 30 times, just as you did me.
Kill you.
Mm-hmm. Friends, Romans, countrymen, I will take your ears off the side of your head. And I will bury them in a box.
As a necklace.
And wear them as a necklace. And I will bury your head in a box. And many years from now, Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt will find them. And we'll open the box. And it will have Gwyneth Paltrow's head inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a good choice. Mine, I took a little bit more of a, I don't know why. I almost went maybe like kind of serious and dark with this one. I was like, part of me was like, yeah, I could do a little bit of a mashup here. Part of me thought I would take Liam Neeson from The Grey and have him be like some weird version of Little Red Riding Hood where he has to get revenge on wolves. Because that could be fun. Actually, that would be kind of fun. I'd watch that movie. You can call me Red Riding Hood. There's nothing little about me. The one I picked was because I was looking up. I was like, what's some good examples of people throughout history wanting to get revenge? And I'm like, I picked one. I was like, you know what? I would actually watch this movie. And I don't know. And I didn't have time to look up and see if any movies have been made about it. And I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this name. Have you guys ever heard this is an actual historical thing? Have you ever heard of a group called the Nakam? The Nakam or the Nakam or Nakam. Okay. So apparently this was after the Holocaust. This is a group of 50 Holocaust survivors that it was their mission to get revenge on Germans and Nazis and indiscriminately just whatever they could do to kill. That's what they did. They poisoned water supplies. They poisoned food of German POWs that were being held by the Americans. And when they were caught, they basically were like, yeah, the only thing I regret is that I couldn't get more of them. So I took that and I was like, that sounds a little bit like the very intense, kind of like what we've gotten from Liam Neeson in the last several years of he will find you, he will kill you kind of a deal. Like, don't mess with him. Like I could absolutely see Liam Neeson being a character in a movie about this group of people.
Wasn't there was I'm trying to think. There was a movie, I don't know if it was about this group, but there was a movie about the people that were the Nazi hunters afterwards. And it was, I think it was like the Israeli group that would go after these guys. And it was a movie, and I can't think of the guy's name, but he played Hector in Troy. And then he was in a movie that I think kind of told a fictionalized account of all that. Am I anywhere? Is that ringing a bell with anything?
maybe. I don't know if this is the same.
Who played? Okay, so in Troy, who played Hector?
That's a good question. Was it Eric Bana?
Eric Bana. I want to say Eric Bana was then in a movie. Unless I'm totally...
He was in Munich. Are you thinking of that one?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of... But that wasn't that wasn't taking revenge on the Nazis.
No.
No, that was after the whole Olympic attack. I don't know. I'll actually do my research and call into the show and all that. But what you're describing sounds fascinating.
Right. So like I could see a Liam Neeson being a kid, which would be interesting after having been in Schindler's List to then also be in a character in this movie.
Yeah.
But that was not like a, because I looked back at the question. I was like, did I mean for this question to be a little bit like funnier and lighthearted? And then I took it to a really dark, serious place.
Why not? You're the boss.
Yes.
Yeah. It's your podcast. You do whatever the heck you want.
I think I did. So that's my choice.
Yeah.
Is the Nakum or Nakum or however you say it.
This isn't quite revenge, but I think my answer that I came up with
is your dish a little warmer than you'd like?
Yes, it's exactly. Yeah. I would love to see, and I talked, it would be months ago now in terms of movie podcast timeline, but the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to see more of those stories told. And whether you want a more fictionalized account, like a Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare movie, or you want a more realistic account, but I would love to see him in one of those movies. And I'm just going to say, I just name dropped it twice. That movie was fantastic. It was based on historical events. It was a fictionalized account, but anybody out there that likes The Great Escape, Where Eagles Dare, Guns of Navarone, but told in a modern, I think it's Guy Ritchie, if I've got it right, style. And it's fictionalized, but then if you go and read like what really happened, I mean, it's like the movie doesn't, like what happened in real life was incredible. And many of these characters that came out of this, this group was basically the forerunner to the British MI6. And who was the guy that wrote James Bond?
Fleming.
Ian Fleming.
Ian Fleming was actually really involved in it, and many of the characters that he met during the Second World War informed his writing of the character James Bond. And I just think that Liam Neeson could play some of these characters that I've read about. I did a little reading on the resistance in Crete during the Second World War, and I mean, the stories are incredible. And there's one where they actually, this group of resistance fighters that was made up of British special operatives and basically Cretan shepherds, came together, and they actually abducted a German general on Crete and totally stopped, threw off the entire Nazi war effort in that area of the world, because they spent a month or more on the island of Crete. They were able to keep this general right away from the Germans, and the cast of characters that they talk about were incredible. And I think that one of the characters, I'm gonna be really biased here, and he was early 20s at the time, and I'm going to mispronounce his name. It's like George Psychondakis, I think, but they call him the Cretan Runner. And he would basically, in the middle of the night, on a starvation diet, dodging Nazi patrols, and would run 50 to 60 miles across the island to carry messages and all this. And I mean, fascinating characters. And there was this, and this is a real person. It's Patrick Lee Fermor, I think I'm saying his name. And basically he just kind of before the war, he was an Irishman, and he would wander, just kind of walk across Europe, and he got into all sorts of adventures, and basically was in different countries and hung out with nobility and royalty and like the common folk and just traveled all around. And then when the war kicked off, joined the British special, basically the spies, right? The forerunner to MI6. And he was involved in this. And I just would see a Liam Neeson role somewhere in all that. So I just threw down a whole bunch of things that I found fascinating, but there's books on it. There's movies around it. And I just think there's so much great either history to be revealed or fictional stories to be told based on those events. And I think Liam Neeson would be fantastic in any of that.
Yeah. As you were talking about this, I don't know if you've seen this movie or not, but I feel like this would be one that either of you guys would enjoy. Sam Neill, which we know from, not Sam Neill, different Sam. Sam Elliott, which we know from cowboy movies, Big Lebowski, and why am I blanking? Tombstone. We know him from that, so we know him as like this, kind of gruff guy, a little bit of a maybe like an American Liam Neeson, maybe you could say. There was a movie,
he certainly has a set of skills.
He does. He has and a voice too. Like he has the really good voice. I'll be spoiling it by giving you the title of the movie, but you can go find it. I think it might be streaming somewhere for free right now, but you might have to go look for it. Came out in 2018. It is a movie called The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot.
Oh, there you go.
So, I mean, the movie is a bit of a spoiler, but it's an interesting enough movie. It's like, wait a minute, wait, what? The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot. Like, yes, that's exactly. You want to talk about a movie being exactly what the title is telling you.
Right.
Like, Rob Roy, who's Rob Roy? The Man Who Killed the Hitler. Oh, I know what that movie's about. Yeah. So some of the things that you described as you were describing some of these other things, I was like, that reminds me a little bit of that movie.
Okay.
It has some interesting, like a little play on history and a little play on some fantastical things. And yeah, it's got some fun stuff, little almost like feels a little bit of a revenge-y type thing in it. So yeah,
it's going on the list.
There you go. Number 2, what is your favorite medieval, Renaissance, early modern epic movie? Something that takes place maybe between 500 and 1800 CE, AD, whichever letters you like best.
I'm a sucker for a period Robin Hood piece. Like it sounds dumb, but it could almost be any of them.
Yeah.
Like I'm kind of a sucker for that story. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So that's probably my answer.
Yeah, I had a little bit of trouble with this one of like, well, I love Braveheart. I love Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Part of me, like the goofy part of my heart, wants to say Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Of course. I mean,
yeah.
Because if I'm a sucker for a Robin Hood piece, I'm also a sucker for a King Arthur.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Any type, any style, you name it, let's do it.
Yeah.
That's true. John, what are the parameters again? What is the time period? And
well, I mean, because I wanted to include anything that could range from like a kind of a Braveheart, King Arthur-ish time period, which is like around the year 1000 to about 1300, all the way up to anything that might be like a historical epic that would be Revolutionary War kind of time period.
Okay.
So it's kind of because at first I looked it up. I was like, well, Braveheart is 1300. This movie, Rob Roy, is 1700s. So I was like, what is that time period? So I was trying to say from like, I think I said from 500 to 1800, but I mean really like from 1000 to about 17 or 1800. Because it spans several, like that's partly medieval, that's partly Renaissance, that's partly early modern time period. So it's like 3 different eras.
Gotcha.
If you like,
so basically,
yeah, Bo. Yeah. If you like a good King Arthur story, have you seen the movie The Green Knight?
Doesn't ring a bell. Doesn't mean I didn't see it.
Okay, it's based on the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you might like that one.
By the way, not to steal anything from Pat's world, but I think I've mentioned this before. One of my favorite jazz charts, right there. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight.
Yeah.
Great little chart, man. It's fun.
Yes.
So I don't know. I don't know what my answer is for this one. The movie podcaster in me wants to say 1985's Ran by Akira Kurosawa.
The one we just watched, Seven Samurai.
Yeah. So
but,
that's,
I mean,
part of me wants
Robin
to
Hood,
say
King Arthur. Come on.
I know. If I'm going to be true to myself, I probably just need to say Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I know. That's the thing, right? You're like, I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. All right. That's what I'm going to say.
There we go.
And now for something completely different. Pat, what's your answer?
So it's funny because I'm like, man, I wonder if I can push that because so many, I was gonna talk about a lot of the feudal Japan movies, but a lot of those are 1800s, which you were pretty clear that like 19th century. Now, Seven Samurai is earlier, right? I just looked it up, and that's 1586.
Yes.
Which I just looked it up. I'm not that smart. I don't know that thing offhand because I was like, So I would say that one.
Come on, everybody knows that. It's 1586. It was.
If you did.
It'd be cooler if you did.
But everybody knows that, Pat. It was 1586 on like a Tuesday.
I mean, right? Like, oh yes, I recall. It was a Tuesday. But honestly, I was kind of like ransacking my brain, like, okay, what matches and everything, and you basically gave a time period. You didn't give a geographical requirement.
Correct.
So I'm actually going to say Captain Blood.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I now this one I'm shooting from the top of my noggin here. I want to say that was in the 1600s. And it's not quite land-based, but like as far as in that time period, and I think it does involve like relations between like king and out of control lords and nobles and all this kind of stuff. And I love me some pirate movies, and I think in terms of sword fighting and swashbuckling, I mean Errol Flynn, you don't get much better than that. So as long as that matches with the parameters, then I'm going to say Captain Blood.
Okay. Yeah, that matches. All right, and question number 3. If you had to duel someone, if you had to fight in a duel, what's your weapon of choice? And if you need clarification, my first answer I gave was an actual weapon, but if you want fictional weapons as well, that would be okay.
Oh.
You can, if you want to do lightsabers, you can do lightsabers.
I was just going to say an old-fashioned broadsword. I mean, I know I probably can't actually wield one appropriately because they were really big and heavy. But I think an old-fashioned broadsword is what I'd be looking for.
Okay. All right. Patrick?
If I was going to duel someone, I would pick like the gnarliest trail that you could possibly think of running and just be like, okay, point to point, we're going to run this 30-mile section. Right. And like, that would be the duel that I would want to do.
So your duel is to the death then.
Well, no, I only said 30 miles. I'm sorry. Please strike that. I'm not that kind of guy to
I see what you're saying there, Wesley. It's to the pain instead of to the death.
Yes.
But I think in reality, because like if I was like in today's day and age, like if I was going to do it, like I just wouldn't. Do you know what I'm saying? I would say like I think that would be cool, or I think that would be cool. If it had to be something where there was like fighting involved, honestly, any weapon of choice, I probably would say I honestly know enough to get myself into trouble. So I would just say, like no weapons, just like bare knuckles or submission grappling or, I think that, again, not that I know much more than that, but like, I would just keep the weapons out of it. And I think I would, of any of my skill set, that might be the one that I would probably, stand the best chance with.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, the non-violent option, if I was going to say that, I would say some kind of a foot race with like a long distance, because I'm not necessarily the fastest out there. Actually, not necessarily. I'm not the fastest out there, but like it would just be something like that. Like,
okay,
let's just keep going until someone gives in.
Yeah, I think when I was trying to think of my answers, I don't even know if I even thought of the non-lethal option. I was like, oh, duel. It's probably to the death. But so, yeah, let me change my answer just a bit. If it was non-lethal, then I'm just going to go with, I'm going to go with my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go with that because I feel like I can tackle somebody. I've done it before.
Yeah, you can.
So I know what I'm doing with that. If we're going lethal, I had two different options here, because if we're going lethal, I'm definitely losing. So I want to go with what'll end this thing the quickest. So I was trying to pick some different options. I was like, if I'm going to go a real option, then let's just go like a Wild West duel and just do a revolver.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have this either end it for me or end it for the other person as quickly as possible. If it's fictional weapons, I was like, okay, I could go lightsaber, but I feel like you could be lopping off a bunch of, body parts here and there, and that's just painful. I could go sword, but I also think is just a painful way to go. So then I started thinking, all right, at least let's make it quick for whoever's involved. So at first I wrote down one thing and I was like, ooh, no, I think they specifically designed those to be really painful. So I switched from Klingon Disruptor to a Starfleet phaser set on the highest setting.
Ooh.
I'm going to go with like a Captain Terrell, set it on full maximum overdrive, whatever you want to call it, phaser setting. And no matter what Khan says, I'm phasering myself.
Are you listening, Your Excellency?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
It is hard to obey. No. So that's mine, because I think that probably ends it the quickest.
Yeah, there you go.
And I feel like I had read at some point or heard it described at some point that the Klingon disruptors were very painful as it tore apart every atom in your body. I feel like Starfleet is going to design a phaser where it's maybe less painful than the Klingon one.
Mm-hmm.
Is my thought. Well, let's put it this way. The Starfleet of the usual timeline, the Kelvin Starfleet, I can't speak for them. I don't know what they're doing, but
yeah, they cray.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with like traditional Star Trek. I can see them being the less violent of the phasers set on maximum, or the less painful. We'll put it that way. All right. Well, no more pain for us. We finished our discussion, our 3 questions, and finished our discussion of Rob Roy. Fun movie. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, go check it out. This does end our 2-week little mini set of episodes where we will now be leaving Scotland to go other places. In fact, we're leaving Scotland to go on The Last Crusade. So if you come join us here very shortly, our episode for our 10th anniversary rewatch, we're doing this year because we've hit our 10th anniversary of doing the podcast. So next week, or coming fairly soon, I don't know if it'll be a week from now or not, will be our episode on Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. So that is one that we watched several years ago. We're bringing some of those back once a month as we go through this year. And then the week after that is Nixon. So we'll come back, go to Washington, D.C., and then we're going to be flying all the way to France for the end of this month as we do Les Miserables, the 10th anniversary concert. So that'll be the rest of this month. If you're joining us over on Patreon, we did an episode called Pop Culture Rundown, where we kind of did just an overview of 1995. And then our Patreon short is Wolfman from 2025. So I'm looking forward to getting to see that one here this month. I did, over Christmas time, go see the Nosferatu movie, and that one was a lot of fun. So anybody who, if it's still in theaters at the time of you listening to this, go check it out. If it's not, go find it at your local library or somewhere, because it's fun. It's very, It's very dark. It's very gothic. It's don't go in expecting that it's Bram Stoker's Dracula because it's not quite that. And don't go. There were a few people in the theater. I was like, ooh. I didn't read up much on this movie, but there were a couple things I did happen to hear about this movie. Don't go watch this sitting next to one of your parents.
Noted.
Yeah, I heard, and when I saw the movie, I was like, oh, yeah, no, didn't quite expect some of that. So it's probably going to be a little awkward if you decide to take one of your parents to go see this movie, and don't take one of your kids thinking, oh, look, my kids liked Vampire Diaries. Maybe they'll like this one. No, please don't. Yeah.
Or, be ready to pay for the therapy.
Be ready to have some conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, all right. Well, gentlemen, as always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, John. Great
John.
seeing you again.
Good to see you, boys.
All right, everybody, be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies, and we will see you back here next time.
Bring the lights down low, it's time to show. Lights, camera, you know what we mean. Behold the magic of the silver screen. Some movies rock, some movies